What's up, nerds? I'm Wes of Neverboard Gaming, and today I'm taking a look at Incoming Transmission seeking funding on Kickstarter. Before we get started, it is important to know that all of this is a prototype, so I don't know if the artwork is final, if the components are final. The whole game could be different by the time you see it, but let's get started. Incoming Transmission is a fantastic co-op that's somewhere between Codenames and Bomb Squad, where you have one player who's giving orders and then one or more players who are receiving those orders and trying to figure out what order they go in and executing them. You have a certain amount of rounds dictated by the transmission cards, and at the end of that, you have 3 missions to complete, and if you don't complete them, you lose, and if you complete them during that time frame, you guys win. Thematically, the one player who's giving the orders is like on Earth or at home base, and they can see what's going on with this station. Like I'm kind of assuming it's like a space station, and they say, okay, this needs to be fixed, or we need this next to this, so they're going to send up a bunch of orders, but they get jumbled in translation, and the people that are on the station kind of get the orders, but they don't really know what came when. It's like you get emails all at the same time and it doesn't give you an order. So they've got to figure out when to do things and what actually needs to go where. So you'll have orders like go north, go east, go south, fix something, pick something up, drop something off. I think that's pretty much it. And because you're limited on how many directional commands you have, like you can only tell someone to go north twice. So if you want them to go north 3 times, then you're going to have to take 2 turns to get them there. In addition to that, you have to give 5 commands every single time. So maybe you only want to give 3 commands, so the other 2 commands you might need to give like contradictory, like go east and west, so that they like take those turns up but don't really go anywhere. And you can't give any commands that are impossible to follow. So that does give the people who are figuring out a little bit of a clue, but it's still difficult for the person giving the clues because you're like, oh, well, I don't want them to go that way, but I have to tell them to go that way because that's the only card I have left to give them. In addition, because you have these 3 different puzzles you're trying to get them to solve simultaneously, you have to kind of figure out, maybe solve multiple puzzles at once, or at least what's the best way economically to get them to do it, because you only have 7 rounds. You have 7 of these transmission cards, so you only have those few amount of rounds to get all 3 things done. So hopefully you get some things that are somewhat close together, not really far away, and you want to make sure that you're doing the things that are close together at the same time. And as it gets more difficult, the farther you get in the transmission deck, the more jumbled up the messages get. You want to make sure that you give them the more complicated missions first, because it's going to get harder, so you want it to be easier to solve the things when there's less information available or more wrong information available. The way it gets harder is these transmission cards, in the 5 commands you give, the level 1s say you actually get to tell them one of the steps in what order it goes in. So if you want them to go north, north, repair, collect, south, you can tell them, okay, well, number 3, the card will say, give them number 3. So north, north, collect, repair. So you can say, okay, repair is number 3. So they know in the first 2 actions they have to get somewhere to be able to repair something. So they can look at the board and say, okay, well, with the directions they have, I can get here and repair something, and I can get here and repair something. Or hopefully they only have one option that gives them a really good hint, which is part of why when you're figuring out what clues to give them, you want to make sure that it makes sense, that there's only one way you can execute all 5 of these commands that is even possible. As it gets harder, you may have some where you don't get to give them any order. You just, here's your 5 commands, good luck. And the level 3 and 4, what gets harder is there's actually an error where you're going to add in a random command that you didn't select. So they get 6 cards. The level 3s, you still get to tell them, this one is right, it goes in spot number 2 or spot number 4. The cards will tell you which one you give them, but you are going to then, after they have that one, hand them 5 cards. And of those 5 cards, they only need to use 4 of them, so they have to figure out like which one they actually want to use and which one is probably the error. And again, hopefully it makes a lot of sense, like, oh, well, this one doesn't make any sense why it would be with these. but they could get something that just sends them in the completely wrong direction, and then you've got to try to get them back onto it. And the real crux of what makes it difficult is the person giving commands, it's like code names. They're not supposed to give any indication to what's right and wrong other than the cards they hand them. So you can't grimace, you can't like, You have to just sit there stone-faced and just hand them the cards. And you can kind of see how the people you're playing with need it. When I was playing with my wife, who's not as much of a gamer, I had to kind of explain a few times, like, okay, now remember, you can only pick these up. And I wasn't trying to necessarily give her hints, like, maybe I'll go here. I'm like, nah, well, if you go over there, you can't do that. Remember, you have a pick up. But more just like rules, explanations, and reminders. But you'll kind of figure out how it works best with your group. But after a few plays, when you really have the rules down, they do say that in the spirit of the game, you really want to give zero information to the person who's trying to figure things out. And you can play with more than 2 people. You can have like 3 or 4 people trying to figure out what order they go in. And kind of like with code names, I personally won't play it that way unless like we have 3 people and we just want to kind of show it to them, and then one person will sit out, because I think that, well, it can be beneficial to have 2 people figuring things out and discussing things. More often than not, I feel like you have like one person who's like, oh, it's going to be this. The other person's like, but it could be that. And they end up messing it up because they discussed so much and figured out, I don't know, they almost seem to always go with the wrong one. This was a surprisingly fun puzzle game, though, where both sides, like at first I was like, oh, well, the person giving commands, they're probably not going to have as much fun because they just pick the cards out, hand them, and they can't say anything. Whereas the person who's figuring things out gets to talk, they get to walk their way through things, they get to control the little meeple dude moving around the board. But as I was playing it, I was like, it really is both people figuring out like reverse engineering a puzzle. The person giving commands has to say, okay, I want them to do this and this and this. So what's the best way to get them there? So they need to have these commands. Okay, but is there a better or worse way to get them there? Like, okay, well, so like the fastest way would be pick up, south, south, deliver. Okay, but you have to give a 5th action, and since you can't tell them to go down again, should you give them like conflicting orders, like pick up, down, down, deliver, up, like go north? Because then they're like, okay, well, north, south, those kind of cancel each other out, so maybe that's not it. But then they might drop it in the wrong place because they would go like, south, drop, north, south, and then you're like, that wasn't where I wanted you to put it, so maybe you should tell them to go like south, east, so that way, like, okay, well, east, I can't drop it off here, so this is the only place that makes sense, while also setting them up in a good position to fill one of the other 2 objectives that you have. The other thing that makes the game a little bit easier is the signal boost cards. So every time someone completes one of these objectives, they're going to get a signal boost, which is kind of like a cheat. Like, okay, I'm going to use this card and you have to tell me where this command goes, or like, okay, well, you get to tell me what goes in spot number 3, or you get to tell me which one of these cards doesn't actually belong. And that does help you if you're like completely stuck, or if there's too many options, you can play one of those, but you only get 3 of them, or I guess you only get 2 of them during the game, because you only get them when you complete an objective. So you do kind of want to hold on to those and not spend them too fast. So I had a lot of fun with Incoming Transmission. It's just a really solid 2-player co-op puzzle game. It works great with your spouse or just a friend. I feel like most co-op games is 2 people basically working through what could be a solo game. We're like, okay, we're both trying to figure out this. These are the people we control, like Pandemic and Rising 5 and Defenders of the Realm and all of these games where we're all just doing the same thing and doing it together, where this, again, is like Codenames in that it's co-op, we want each other to win, but it's not just us sitting next to each other trying to figure things out. That way there's not like one person who's really playing and one person who's giving input, but this really has 2 dedicated spots that people are able to play in, and it just works really well together. If you have a spot in your collection where you just need a good, solid 2-player co-op, it's really quick. It plays in like 15, 20 minutes, maybe, as you get going, or if you're playing on the easier levels, it can't even get faster than that, where you can play boom, 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 like mission, 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 or it's great to play if you only have 2 people show up to game night and you're waiting on more people. This is a great game for that. The artwork kind of has that like 8-bit nostalgic thing going on for it, and I think this is just a surprisingly fun puzzle co-op. So if you want to check out the Kickstarter, there's going to be a link in the description box down below, as well as a little card popping up. You can click on either one of those to head on over to the Kickstarter page, or if you're already on the Kickstarter page, well, you know what to do from here. The backing buttons are like that way. I think they're that way. They're big, green, can't miss them. But regardless, you should make sure to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe so you'll never be bored. So I had a lot of fun with Incoming Transmission. It's a great one. Let me just stop it.